Hi, I'm Dr. Felice Gersh, your integrative physician, bringing you the next edition of Living in the Age of Coronavirus. For those of you who've just joined me for the first time, I want to introduce myself. I am an integrative physician located here in Irvine, California. I have a medical practice, the Integrative Medical Group of Irvine, where I come to my office where I am right now and treat patients with a whole array of issues because my goal, my mission in life is to help every single person to optimize their happiness, their health, their opportunities. Well, now we're faced with a new era, this era of the coronavirus, one that none of us have ever faced before in our lives. And we're all struggling to figure out how to live our lives given the new reality. Well, today I want to talk to you about this new condition, this inflammatory process, the multi-systems inflammatory process in children. So what is going on with kids? We thought that they were protected. We thought that they were the lucky ones, that kids would not be impacted by the coronavirus. And now we're finding that there is an ugly face to the coronavirus when it comes to the children. It's a different kind of a reaction. So let me explain a little bit about what's going on with this inflammatory multisystem syndrome of children. Well, it turns out that children have very robust immune systems. Who gets high fevers? The elderly or the children? Typically, of course, it is the children. And we know that sometimes after children have vaccines, they will get very high fevers. We know that sometimes children even have seizures when they have high fevers from infections. And we've known for a long time that sometimes children have very rampant immune responses to certain infectious agents. For example, we've learned many decades ago about a condition that you don't see much anymore called scarlet fever, where after children would get a strep infection, like a strep throat, because they didn't have antibiotics in those days, they would get occasionally this terrible red rash on their face, and they would have multi-system organ problems. And sometimes children after a strep infection would get acute glomerulonephritis. It's actually an acute autoimmune condition involving the kidneys. So we've recognized for a long time that there are these processes that can occur in children after certain types of infections. Well, now it's turned out that comparable kinds of inflammatory processes can occur in a very small minority of children who are infected with the new novel coronavirus, which we have labeled SARS-CoV-2. And often we call it COVID because that is the name of the pandemic, COVID-19. So what is happening in the children who have this? Well, we've known for a while that there's another similar condition called Kawasaki's disease, and that is a similar multi-system inflammatory process that is involved in an acute overreaction of the child's immune system to some kind of infectious agent. We're always in a state of mystery. We don't really know with Kawasaki's what is it that's triggering it, because often there's a lag time and between the infection and the syndrome, this multi-system organ system of inflammation. There's a lag time because it's not actually the organism, the infectious agent that is directly causing the damage. It's the immune system. So what you should really think of this multi-system inflammatory syndrome that's now been found to be related to the coronavirus is sort of a related process to acute autoimmune disease. It's really in that same family. So let me explain, like, what is an autoimmune problem? What is that? Well, it turns out we now understand so much more about what can trigger an autoimmune disease. It starts with some kind of pathogen, an infectious agent. It could be an overgrowth even of bacteria in the intestinal tract that is normally there, but it's overgrown. And it enters into the body through impaired gut barrier function, also known as leaky gut, and it gets into the body, and the immune system sees it and creates antibodies, because that's what our immune system is designed to do, to protect us, to create antibodies. That's the adaptive immune system. That's like the secondary system of the immune system. The first is to try to just outright kill it with all kinds of like enzymes that are destructive. And then we develop the antibodies to, it's like a targeted approach to protect us. Well, in the process of creating antibodies against this pathogen, this invading bacteria or virus, whatever it is, we actually make antibodies against our own tissues. This is actually normal, because what are we? What are we humans? We are actually the same DNA and RNA as viruses and bacteria. So the way I like to frame it is, if you know Legos, of course everyone has played with Legos. If you have one Lego, that would be like the virus or the bacteria. And so what are we humans? We're like massive Legolands. Like, we're incredible structures made up of Legos. But if you look at each little Lego, they're actually made up of the same stuff as the gigantic structures that you can create with all those Legos. That's us, Legoland on steroids. So when you make antibodies against a virus, against a bacteria, guess what? The agent you're attacking looks like us. We have the same general structure of RNA and DNA as the invaders. It's really difficult to tell sometimes who you're attacking, and we get caught in the crossfire. But you know what? When you have an acute infection, you resolve the infection, the antibodies die down, we are fine. But sometimes the immune system can create a gigantic immune response. We don't know why this is in some children. It could even happen in adults, but it seems to focus more in children. It also can create another condition known as PANS or PANDAS, which is a pediatric syndrome, also felt to be in response to an antigen, a protein that's found on an invading pathogen. And what happens is the immune system is overly robust. It creates this crazy amount of immune response, which in the crossfire is us, our own organ systems. Now, in the case of this multi-system inflammatory process involving the coronavirus, it seems to be concentrated a lot in the blood vessels, in the vasculature. So you get an inflammatory response in these blood vessels. Now, what are the presenting signs? And then we'll talk about what this all means. Well, often the presenting signs are very high fever. That shows the immune system is on fire. That's what the fever is. Immune system creating all those inflammatory cytokines, creating that fever. What else? A lot of GI symptoms. Nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, a lot of GI symptoms. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out that a huge percentage, 70-80% of the immune system resides in the GI tract, okay? And we also know that the coronavirus can act on the GI tract. We know that it can impact multi-organ systems, and the GI tract is, we know that the GI tract definitely is a target of the coronavirus. And there's a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of immune system resides in the GI tract. So GI symptoms are very common in the children who develop this inflammatory multi-organ syndrome. What else? High fever, GI symptoms. They often get rashes, and they often have severe fatigue, which can actually predate all of the other problems. And they can develop cardiac problems. So blood vessels supply the heart. We all know what's a heart attack. A heart attack is when you have a problem with blood supply to the myocardium, the muscle of the heart, from the coronary arteries. Well, what happens if you have inflammation of the coronary arteries? Well, you can have problems with the heart. If you have a problem with your vascular system, if you have inflammation within the blood vessels, well, they feed every organ in the body, the brain, the kidneys, the heart. So basically, if you have essentially a vasculitis, that's really what this seems to be. That's why it's multi-organ system, is that the blood vessels feed every organ. If you have basically an autoimmune response, an amazingly robust immune response that involves the vascular system, Any single organ in the body can be involved, of course, including the skin as well. So we know that there are all these different manifestations. So what are they treating this problem with? Well, what they found is that giving steroids. Now, what do we give steroids for? To reduce the body's immune response, to lower inflammation. Inflammation is the body's innate immune response. So we were trying to quiet down the immune response of these children that are having this robust, over-the-top immune response, creating vasculitis, inflammation throughout the vasculature. So steroids, they're also finding giving intravenous immunoglobulins, purified immunoglobulins, is also helping. And in some of the data now coming out of Europe, I believe from France, is showing incredibly excellent responses. So I want to leave this whole story with a message of hope. Number one, fortunately, this over-the-top immune response, which is comparable to like a over-the-top autoimmune response, where basically you're making antibodies designed to try to kill off this, well, it's not a kill because it's deactivate a virus, but in the process you're over the top creating antibodies that can afflict your own body's systems. In this case, predominantly it seems the vasculature. So this is only happening in a tiny percentage of children who are infected, just like Kawasaki's is not a common disease. The even conditions like scarlet fever and glomerulonephritis from strep, they weren't common, but these kinds of robust immune responses to infectious agents in children do happen. We've known this for a long time. But in this case, it is a very small minority of children who get this response. Now we are aware of it. The medical community is on high alert, and you are also on high alert. So if you're a mother, a grandparent, and there are little children, and by little, it seems like it's predominantly in the 2 through the teen years, as opposed to Kawasaki's, which tends to be in the infancy up to the age of 2. This is a little bit older child that seems to be the most impacted by this multisystem inflammatory response. So, but now everyone is on high alert, and the medical community is learning how to treat it aggressively and efficiently and effectively so that children are surviving this. A very, very few have died, and unfortunately, they were in the beginning when nobody really understood what was happening. And so often the treatment for them, the appropriate treatment, was delayed because nobody was aware. The parents weren't aware, the pediatricians weren't aware. Even in the hospital settings, they didn't know what was happening with these children, and they often delayed the treatment, which we now know is effective, this high-dose steroids, along with the immunoglobulins, which so far, that seems to be working in, by far, the vast majority of children. And happy news, once they're treated, they seem to be recovering. Their hearts are recovering, their blood vessels are healing. Remember, children have amazing abilities for resilience and healing. So they look like they're healing with no long-term sequela. So that's the happy news. We're aware of this. We actually understand it. It's not like something we've never seen before. We just didn't know that this was happening in children who were getting exposed and getting infected with the COVID. We didn't know that, but now we do. So what are we going to do about the children? We don't really know in terms of, well, should you send your kids to school or not? Well, you know, we've known about this for other infectious agents, and people did not keep their kids home. I think, you know, everyone, smarter minds, will put them to work to try to figure out what the best approach is. But I think one of the best approaches is just to be on high alert, awareness, and do everything you can to keep your kids as healthy as possible. Get them, if you can, I don't care how you do it, to eat vegetables and fruit. Get the processed foods, the candies, the chips, all of that stuff, the convenience foods. Just get it out of the house. There are ways to help train your kids, if you can call it that, to love vegetables. You know, if you need to, put ketchup on everything. Put barbecue sauce on things. Put mustard. relish, whatever you have to do to get them to eat their vegetables. Grind them up and put them into potato pancakes. I mean, there are so many ways. I know creative people there have figured out ways to help kids to love vegetables. Create smoothies. I'm not even a big fan of smoothies, but if that's what it takes, put fruit in. You can put all kinds of vegetables in a smoothie and then add an apple or some berries, and then they will love it. Call it a milkshake. But it's beautiful, it's colorful, it has strawberries and raspberries and blueberries, and you also put all the greens in. You can put in beets. You can get them to enjoy the fruits and vegetables. It's summer. There's so many wonderful fruits out. Use that for dessert. If you don't want to just eat a piece of raw fruit, you can bake them. You can turn it into a pretend pie. Take peaches and bake them. Take apples and bake them. Put cinnamon on it, forget the sugar. And you know what? If you put it in a pretty parfait dish, maybe put a tiny, tiny bit of ice cream or one of the non-dairy, like made from coconut milk, just like the tiniest of scoops. Have you ever been to France? Do you know what they serve? The first time I went there, I was in shock because I was an American and I ordered a dessert, and the scoop of ice cream was the size of a melon ball. Those little melon balls? Like, it looks like smaller than a ping pong ball. So that's what you give. Less than a ping pong ball, like the size of a walnut. And you just add that little bit, or you can make coconut type whipped cream, and you just make it from coconut milk. You don't have to add sugar. You can take some dark chocolate, put a little sprinkles of dark chocolate on top, and you have a fabulous dessert. And you don't have to buy processed food, candy. All those things weaken children's immune systems. We don't want that. We want them to have a properly regulated immune system. We really don't know why certain children have these crazy over-the-top immune responses, but you can never go wrong by doing all the things that we know, absolutely, not controversial, that they help to keep kids healthy. Exercise, sunlight. Don't slather your kids in all kinds of sunblocks. If you need to protect them from the sun sometimes because they're out too much, use zinc oxide. Okay, not the chemical ones, but the mineral blocks. Like zinc oxide is the safest. And use cover-ups. Buy the bathing suits that have long sleeves and pants, that they look kind of like you're going to go out scuba diving, and let them wear those so that they don't have to put all of these chemicals on their skins all the time. You can have fun. The summer is here. Social distance with your vacations. Sometimes families are cocooning together, so they have just one family with other kids who are also taking a lot of precautions, and they interact with them, but in safe ways, trying to keep some social distancing, and mostly activities outdoors, where even if the virus comes out of somebody, it goes into a dissipated environment, into the atmosphere. So this illness, this multi-system inflammatory problem, this syndrome that now we discovered is affecting a small percentage of kids who get infected with COVID. We are aware of it. It's known how to treat it, and very effectively. Earlier treatment is better than later treatment. So stay on high alert. Help your kids to stay healthy and happy and active and as low in stress as possible. Help them to get adequate sleep. Get them their vegetables and their fruit and whole grains. Avoid processed foods. And give them a multivitamin, maybe some omega-3. Talk to your pediatrician about some good advice for some just general type supplements to keep them healthy for the few things that they may not get in their diets. We have every reason to be hopeful and optimistic that our kids will stay safe and get through this and weather this era of the coronavirus. So thank you for joining me today. I look forward to our next interface in the next few days. Anything that you have that you would like to ask me, please go ahead and send it to me in an email. That's the easiest way, and then I can answer your questions personally or on the next show. just send them to mail@integrativemgi.com. And I look forward to hearing your comments, seeing your questions, and together we will weather this era of the coronavirus. Stay safe, stay happy. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.